أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد والأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم وغاصب حقوقهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: وجعلنا منهم أئمة يهدون بأمرنا لما صبروا وكانوا بآياتنا يوقنون. صلوات Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Sajda, ayat number 24, talks about the two most important qualities that He looked into those whom He appointed as the Imams and the leaders and the guides for the human society. One is known as Sabr and the other is known as Yaqeen. Keeping that criteria in mind, when we look at the life of our fourth Imam, since these are the days when we are remembering the events of Karbala, the family of Imam Hussein, in particular our fourth Imam, he basically is a true realization of this concept of Imamat that we see in this ayat. That he was on that level of Sabr as well as the level of Yaqeen. And when we look at his example last night, my attempt was to kind of clarify the image that some of our people have on their subconscious level about the Imam as Abid Bimar. You know, he was Bimar only at that time, not before it and not after it. Not Nauzubillah that he was suffering from an illness, which bothered him constantly. No. And that was because of the maslahat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, our fourth Imam was as courageous and shaji' as Amir al-Mu'mineen and Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wa salam. Salawat bin One more example of his willingness to do jihad bisayf, which I forgot to mention last night, is during the last meeting of Imam Hussein with his son Ali Zainul Abidin. You know the events of Karbala when Imam Hussein alayhi salam came for what is known as the final al-wida, the final meeting with his family. After meeting everyone, getting ready, he goes to the tent of his son with the sister Zainab. And when he sat down, and when Bibi Zainab, walked the nephew up to see, who has come to see you. And when Imam looked at the situation of his father, he actually tried to get up. And he asked Bibi Zainab that, "Oh my aunt, bring my sword and bring my walking stick, my asa." And Bibi Zainab asked him, "What do you want to do?" He says, "How can it be possible that the grandson of the Prophet is going to the battlefield alone and a young person like me is sleeping here in the tent? This is not acceptable." This is where Imam Hussain alayhi salam basically calmed him down. That it is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He uses different means in order to accomplish, His own will. And He wants this imamat to continue in my progeny through you. And this is one way of preserving you. And so do not let that situation of a day before Ashura or the day after Ashura and the day of Ashura itself. Yes, in that time context, those who compose the Marsiyah, those who recite the events, they are absolutely true and right in what they are saying. But we as listeners have to realize this is about that time frame. Not that, Nauzubillah, Imam was suffering from an illness as such. And when you look at his shuja'at, we talked about, al-jihad bil-lisan. Tonight I would like to talk about another dimension of his jihad, which we would term as al-jihad bil-qalam. Because there are different ways of doing the jihad for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the second one would be by qalam. When we look at this phenomenon, I think it's very important to understand the role of the fourth Imam. Because when we look at the history of Shiaism, you cannot just isolate one Imam's life. You actually have to look at it from a broader perspective. And when you look at the history of Shiaism from the broader perspective, you come to realize that you can very clearly separate the era of the first three Imams and then the era of the following three Imams. The era of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, this is the era of the survival of the Shia community. This is where the Shia community is trying to stand up on its own, as a minority in that majority. And it is struggling against all kinds of opposition from all different sides. And this is where we see, it culminated with the events of Karbala. So from Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen to Imam Hassan and then Imam Hussain alayhi salam, this is the era of survival. What happened on the day of Ashura was the most last thing that the enemy could do. They cannot do anything worse than what they did on the day of Ashura. They tried to eliminate the family of the Prophet. What else could they do? But they realized that their process of killing the shuhada from the family of Ali Muhammad did not actually eliminate the process and this mazhab. Actually, the blood of shuhada became the source of survival of this small community within the larger Muslim ummah at that time. And so now that the survival was guaranteed, and that's why sometimes when you hear the remarks made by our scholars, which is very, in a way historically a very true statement, that no one after Yazid ever dare demand bay'at from any of the Imams later on. And so from the days of the first Imam to the third Imam, this is the era of survival of the Shia community and the Shia faith. Now we reach to the second phase of history, starting with the fourth Imam and culminating with the sixth Imam. And this is the era of education. Now that this survival of the community and the mazhab is guaranteed, now there was a need in order to properly educate the community about their own faith, their own morality, and their own belief system. And this is a process which was started by Imam Zainul Abidin, expanded further by Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, and it reached to its peak at the hands of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. Salawat. Why do we call our fiqh Ja'fari? We can very easily say fiqh Alawi, or we can say fiqh Mahdawi. Either we look at Ali as an identity for Shias, and so we say fiqh Alawi. Or we say we are Shia Ithna Ashari, and so we say our fiqh is fiqh Mahdawi. But no, we call it fiqh Ja'fari. Why? Because of that opportunity which was available to him, where he was able to expand the knowledge that he had inherited from his forefathers and present that to the Shias and the other members of the Ummah, to the extent that now you look at the Shia sources, you will see most of them come from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. But the point that we do not realize, that this fiqh is fiqh Ja'fari, that is the end result. This is the end result of a process started by Ali Zainul Abidin. It was Imam Zainul Abidin who actually started this process of educating the community in a more formal way, and which was then carried on and expanded by his son, and then reached its peak at the hand of his grandson. And so this is where we have to realize that when we talk about Imam Zainul Abidin, his contribution in Shia history is very crucial and very important. He came at a very, difficult time in the history of Shiaism after the events of Karbala. One of the legacies that we have from the fourth Imam, as far as his Jihad bil Qalam is concerned, is a book which he has left for us. And that is what I would like to introduce tonight, in order to appreciate the greatness of our fourth Imam. And it is a book known as As-Sahifa As-Sajjadiyya. I'm sure all of you heard about it. But let me talk about this book, in order to make sure that, you go back and at least try to get in touch with that book. By looking at that book, by trying to understand the purpose and the message of that book, you will actually be getting in touch with Imam Zainul Abidin himself. When we talk about this book known as Sahifa As-Sajjadiyya, sometimes, unfortunately these days, everything that we have, people raise questions. Is it authentic or not? So let us look at the authenticity of this book, number one. As far as the authenticity is concerned, there is absolutely no doubt among the scholars of the Shia tradition who deal with this whole field of bibliography, dealing with books. They say there is absolutely no doubt that this book is a written document of Imam Zainul Abidin. 2 copies were given by him to his 2 sons. One was given to Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, and another one was given to his son Zayd, who became Shaheed later on. The copy of Imam Muhammad al-Baqir was then given to his son Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. And the copy preserved by Zayd was given to his son Yahya bin Zayd bin Ali Zainul Abidin. And from this both copies, coming from 2 sons of the fourth Imam, we have a narrator by the name of Mutawakkil bin Harun al-Saqafi al-Balakhi, who actually has transcribed this Sahifa from this both manuscripts which has come to us. So when it comes to the source and the authenticity of the book, this is absolutely beyond any shadow of doubt. Allama Tabatabai, you must have heard his name, one of the greatest Shia scholar of this century, whose Tafsir al-Mizan is very famous. In 70s, there was a scholar of Islam from the French background, Dr. Henry Corbin, who used to travel to Tehran in the summers. And because of his contact with Dr. Hussein Nasr, who is now in the US, he came to know Allama Tabatabai. Allama Tabatabai didn't speak French. Henry Corbin was probably not that much familiar with Farsi. So Dr. Hussein Nasr would become the translator in between. And some of their discussions were compiled later on and published. In one of these sittings, Henry Corbin raised this question about Sahifa As-Sajjadiyya. He said, are you sure this is the writing of Imam Zainul Abidin? The answer that Allama Tabatabai gave was so beautiful, and that's what I would like to share with you. He said, I don't really care who wrote that book. You go and find the writer of that book, and that will be my fourth Imam. I'm so sure about it that you go and find the author, and that will be our fourth Imam. And so when it comes to the authenticity of the book, there is absolutely, no room for any, discussion whether this is authentic or not authentic. Salawat. The importance of Saif Sajjadiyya. Shias have really described this book very beautifully. The problem is sometimes we just describe the cover of the book. We don't look into it. The title, the other name given for that book is very beautiful. When we say Saif Sajjadiyya, we say Zabur Al Muhammad. Why do we say Zabur? Why don't we say Injil Al Muhammad? Tawrat Al Muhammad? Why is this book called Zabur Al Muhammad? Because if you look at the 4 books that we are taught in madrasa as, Asmani Kitab, Tawrat, Injil, Zabur and Quran. These are the only famous books. It doesn't mean there were only 4 books. Don't want to confuse you, but that is just add the word 4 famous books, you are okay. There are many other books also which came, many sahifa, many kutub. But out of all these, when you look at Tawrat is actually the revelation on Musa alayhi salam, and it has everything, but the main part of that is the law, the Sharia. When it comes to Injil basically did not come to replace Tawrat. It came to complement and correct the corruption which had come in Tawrat. So it is more a supplement to Tawrat. Quran came as a final revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Zabur, what was the role or the place of Zabur in these books? Zabur was not like Tawrat. It was not a book of fiqh and laws. Nor was it like Injil coming to, correct the corruption which had come in Tawrat by the people who came after Musa alayhi salam. Zabur actually is known as the book of Psalms. It is the book of du'as. Because Zabur is the book of prayers and du'as, we call Saif Sajjadiyya Zabur Al Muhammad. Salawat padhna ek baar. Because of the similarity in the contents of both, Zabur is a book of dua and Saif Sajjadiyya is also a book of dua. It was actually an accident by which a very famous Sunni alim of Egypt by the name of Sheikh Tantawi, who lived in the early of the last century in Egypt, where he became familiar with Saif Sajjadiyya. And this was actually through the indirect blessing of a Shia alim, marhum Sayyid Hassan Mujtaba Kamunpuri. He was a very prominent alim in India. During after his education in India, he went to Egypt. And he studied at Al-Azhar. He is the only Shia alim probably in the Shia world who went to also study at Al-Azhar. Or at least in subcontinent, he would be the only one who went there. And when he went to Egypt, he carried some of his own, literature with himself, including a copy of Saif Sajjadiyya. Sheikh Tantawi, who was not that famous that much those days, he became friend of Hassan Mujtaba Kamunpuri. He used to go and visit him in his room. One day while he was sitting, he just happened to pick a book. And that book happened to be Saif Sajjadiyya. He just opened it here and there, looked at a few pages and for some paragraphs. It impressed him so much that he said, "Can I borrow this book for a few days?" And Maulana marhum Hassan Mujtaba Kamunpuri said, "Of course you can borrow this book." After a time when Sheikh Tantawi came back to him, he said, "This is such a powerful book of dua. I had never seen anything like this before. And my biggest complaint with you Shias is that why have you hidden this treasure of Al Muhammad and you do not share it with the rest of the Ummah?" This is how a scholar from the other side accidentally becomes aware of this book, and so much is impressed by that he ends up actually writing an article introducing Saif Sajjadiyya among the scholars in Egypt and praising and even presenting some of the excerpts from Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq. And this is where we have to realize that I think the complaint that he has, that the Shias do not share the treasures of knowledge of Ali Muhammad with the rest of the Ummah, well, his complaint is valid to an extent, but I have a bigger complaint. And I think my bigger complaint is that we have the book, but we just keep the book. The book is not for keeping on the shelf. The book is there to read it, to understand it, to reform our behavior and our character and our akhlaq. Otherwise, there is no sense this book sitting there on the shelf. It is just like this ayat from Surah Jumu'ah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who are imposed with the duty of following the Torah and did not do it, their example is like the donkey carrying the books. So possessing a book doesn't mean anything. We have to actually read the book and use that book in our day-to-day life. Salawat upon the Akbar. Especially when we talk about the role of dua in our life, this is very important. Another problem we have, even those who open the book of du'as, whether it's Sahif Sajjadiyah of Imam Zainul Abidin or other books, they do not realize the difference between Quran and dua. Quran is the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed to the human beings. Dua is opposite. Dua is the kalam of human being. It is the communication of a human being to the Lord. It is not the Lord talking to the people. It is the people talking to their Lord. Does it make sense that you are talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala something that you yourself don't understand? Tilawat al-Quran has its own sawab. Whether you know Arabic or not, understand Arabic or not, it is wahy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Reading that has its own sawab. Although that also is being mentioned as a first step in order to reflect and try to understand the Quran. But when it comes to dua, and I'm sure you people gather here on Thursday nights for Dua Kumail, if there is one person sitting here with Dua Kumail and reciting on the mic, everybody else is just sitting there and listening to it. And the whole gathering, the only person who is talking to Allah is that person. The rest are just sitting. There is no issue there. They are not doing really anything. The person, the mic is there to facilitate so that we can also read that dua. But if we are just sitting there, not doing anything, there is no sawab in it like the way of listening to the ayat of Quran. So realize that when we talk about Quran and dua, there is a big difference. Quran is the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the people, and dua is the speech of a human being, the conversation of human beings to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat pardon. And so we have to understand what we are saying. We have to understand the language of our du'as, because it is my du'a. I am calling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I don't understand what I'm saying, it's not my du'a then. And sometimes, and I'll come to this whole issue, whether we should be reciting du'a in Arabic or not, but bear with me, be patient. This is the majlis of Imam who was known for his sabr. Salawat pardon. In the month of Ramadan, part of the du'as that we recite, everyone recites, Harrim shaybati ala nar. Do you know what it means? Shayba, the gray hair. And we are saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, make this gray hair haram on the fire of Jahannam. What does it mean? The rest of the audience sitting at the back, they also recite the same jumla. Do they have the shayba? So what does it mean? What are you supposed to say? Of course, there are ways of explaining it. Shayba is not in the literal sense. Shayba in the Eastern culture. This is not an Western, understanding. This is an Eastern culture, Middle Eastern and South Asian, where the white beard or gray hair of an elderly person becomes a symbol of his respect, his ihtaram. And when you are saying harrim shaybati ala nar, you basically are not necessarily referring to the hair. What you are saying that, oh Allah, do not disgrace me by putting me in the fire of Jahannam. But at least we should understand that. And therefore some of the ulama say, for example, if the ladies are reciting that, they should slightly change the wordings. Or even the statement, I'm sure the men are very happy with it, was وَزَوِّجْنَا بِالْحُورِ الْعَيْنِ. Now, of course, there are all different interpretations about what does hurul ayn mean. But this is just an example, a very simple example, that when we do dua, we have to understand what we are saying. There is a difference in reciting the Quran and doing the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat alayhi wa sallam. There are two types of du'as. There are du'as which are known as du'a ma'thura. Du'a ma'thura means those du'as which have come from the Quran or the Prophet and the Imams. And then there are other du'as which are known as ghayr ma'thura. When it comes to the second category of du'as, which we will call a personalized du'a, I have a challenge in my life, I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I do that in my own language. I have a problem, I have a difficulty. So when we talk about personalized du'as, of course we do that in our own languages. And it is allowed. It is the only part of wajib namaz where in the qunut you are allowed to recite your own personalized dua in your own language. Not translation of dua ma'thura. So you cannot say, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً, which is from Quran. You cannot read the translation of that in qunut. But if you have a personal issue in life, and you would like to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our fiqh allows you to do that in your own language. This is where we have to understand what does dua mean. Of course, when it comes to dua ma'thura, which are from the Prophet and the Imams, we have to maintain the language because nobody can teach us how to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better than the Prophet and our Imams. You saw Shaykh Tantawi in Arab. When he looks at du'as, Sayyif Sajjadiyya, du'as written by our fourth Imam, even he, as a scholar of the Arab world, is impressed with the style and the language. So we have to preserve that. But when it comes to those du'as, we have to make sure we learn the translation. And if you go through the translation, especially, the example of Dua Kumail, for example. If you are in the habit of reciting it every week on Thursday nights, if you just follow the translation, 3 or 4 weeks, you will be able to understand the gist of the dua, even if you do not understand the Arabic language. And that's where you will see the beauty will come up. There we will see the impact of that dua that Amir al-Mu'minin has taught to us with the wasita of Kumail, one of his companions who became a shaheed. He is the one who brought that dua to us. Especially if you look at dua Kumail, after asking for forgiveness and everything, where we come to the peak of that dua, where Ali is teaching us to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the language of love. Where we reach to the point where we say, oh Allah, I have exhausted my arguments. I cannot, argue against you and against your decision to punish me for my sins. I confess that. But then you approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the window of love. But Amir al-Mu'minin is teaching us, say to him, that, oh Allah, I cannot bear this thought that this tongue, which used to say, La ilaha illallah, you're going to put this in the fire? Oh Allah, I cannot even imagine that the forehead which was going down on sajda to worship you, you will put that in the fire? This feet, which used to take me to the masjid to worship you, I cannot bear that you are going to put these into Jahannam. And at the end, Ali takes us to that mi'raj of spirituality, where he says, say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I accept that I am so sinful, that you have absolute right to put me into the fire of Jahannam. But, oh Allah, how can I bear that separation between me and your mercy? So you're no more talking about this, lawyer's language of trying to defend yourself. No. You're actually talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the language of hub and love. And this can only have its impact on my life and soul if I understand what I am saying. So yes, let us read that in Arabic, because that is from the Ma'sumin, but let us also learn the meaning of those du'as, and then we will see the impact of those du'as in our daily lives. Salawat. Coming to Saif Sajjadiyya, one of the things that we miss in the western part of the world is this network of extended family relationships. Here everybody is alone. They prefer to stay away from others. This is the lifestyle here. But it has some, serious implications in our life. If you look at the Eastern culture, when a person goes through difficulty and they would like to talk with somebody or seek advice about an issue, what do? They look at the, dada or uncle or grandparent or a cousin or a relative whom they can trust. They go there, discuss their issues. Sometimes they get good advice, sometimes not. But at least there is an outlet of talking about the problems that people face in their lives. Here, what happens? When something happens, there is that extended family network is gone here. And if problems pile up, what happens? They say, go for professional help. And I'm not denying that. Don't say, I said don't go to the professionals. What I'm saying is that many times the problem is nothing more than this attempt of relieving yourself of the burden on your chest. There is nobody that you can talk to. Sometimes you just need somebody who would listen to you. Half of the solution is that you're able to, share your worries and your difficulties with someone else. There might not be a solution there, but this itself helps quite a lot on a psychological level. But here, you know what happens? If you look at Islam, what does Islam say? And this is where Sayf al-Sajjadiyya comes into place in our life. Because Islam says that even if you find yourself to be totally alone, there is nobody that you can talk to. There is somebody who is always with you. And that somebody is none other than your Lord. He doesn't abandon you. You can always talk to Him. And that's where we see in some of the wordings of our Ma'asumin where we are told to say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya munisi fi wahdati. O the one who is close to me when I'm all alone, when there is nobody to whom I can turn, you are still there. He himself in Quran, he says, وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I'm closer to the human being, closer than his jugular vein. If you look at the ayat of Quran, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِ عَنِّي, O Rasul, when my people, they ask you about me, where am I? Say to them, فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِي. I am close. I didn't go away. You were the one who went away from me. It is the insan who goes away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah has never abandoned a human being. He says, I am qareeb, I am close. I respond to the dua when you call me. And this is where we have to realize that, when it comes to talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is available. You don't have to wait for the daytime, for the office hours. He is there 24 hours, 7 days of the week. There is no need for appointment with Him. And interestingly, there is no fees there. And even more important than that is the issue of confidentiality. There is no issue that, whatever is being said is been recorded and there is a record of me. No, it is only between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But do we avail that? Are we even aware of that entity in that way? And that's where Sayf al-Sajjadiyya comes to help. It becomes a way of understanding the role that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can play in our life. This is where Imam Zainul Abidin has really left us a treasure that we should cherish and try to preserve it and understand it and spread it among the others. Salawat. At least when you go back home, Sayf al-Sajjadiyya is available in English, it's available in Urdu, Farsi, whatever language you speak, I'm sure it's there. And you will say, maybe I'm promoting a book. No, I don't publish Sayf al-Sajjadiyya. Actually, it's available online free. So even if you don't have a copy at home, it is still available there to you, free online. I'm not even asking you to go and read the book. The only thing I'm asking is go and at least look at what is known as Fihrist Matalib, the table of contents of Sayf al-Sajjadiyya. Once you know what kind of du'as are in there, written by our fourth Imam, if, for God forbid, a situation happens in your life, you will remember that yes, I saw a dua relevant to my situation in Sayf al-Sajjadiyya. That's where you will go back there. And you will use that dua after reading the translation in order to communicate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat. One of the most beautiful du'as of Sayf al-Sajjadiyya is a du'a known as Du'a Makarim al-Akhlaq, where Imam talks about refining the character of a person. See, there is a difference between khalq and khulq. Khalq is our physical creation. And that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way He has created us. We can appreciate beauty, but we cannot praise the person who has the beauty, because that's not doing, of him or her. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who should be praised. But when it comes to the khulq, the character and attitude and behavior of a person, then we can praise or blame the person, because that comes from the person himself. While you cannot change the khalq, you can always change the khulq. Well, you say, maybe I don't know about plastic surgery. I know. But those who go through it, they know it's artificial. But when it comes to the khulq, we can change. And that's where akhlaq comes in. And when Imam says, when he talks about, Dua makarimul akhlaq wa mardiyul amal, look at it. What he's talking about, what is the goal of life? What are the areas that we have to really work on it? What are the qualities which should be there as a zinat for the muttaqeen? And a zinat for those who are salihin and good doers. All these qualities are listed there. It is like a step-by-step guide to our spiritual development. Let me just share with you one example from that dua before I come to the end. There is a concept where Imam introduces us in that dua of afat of ni'mat. Ni'mat means blessings. Can there be an afat in ni'mat? Yes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give us a ni'mat and a blessing, but remember there are always pitfalls even in the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. While we appreciate what Allah has given to us, we should always be aware of the pitfalls which comes with it. There is a passage where Imam, for example, he talks about wealth. وَأَغْنِنِي وَأَوْصِ عَلَيَّ فِي رِزْقِكَ وَلَا تَفْتِنِّي بِالْبَطَرِ. That, oh Allah, make me free from need. Make me affluent so I do not need anyone else. And increase my sustenance. But immediately Imam says, also pray at that time, that, oh Allah, do not test me with ingratitude. Because we might be in need, we will pray, and then, as it said, जब छप्पर फाड़ के खुदा ने दे दिया, दिमाग खराब हो गया. नेमत came down, लेकिन दिमाग खराब हो गया. He blessed, but now that we have the blessings, we forgot Him. The sense of ingratitude. And so if you look at it, it's so beautiful that Imam is saying, okay, this is a good thing. You're asking for ghina, to be free from need. But immediately also pray that you do not become ungrateful towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because we have to realize whatever we do, sometimes, we say, what are you people talk about Allah? This is my hard work. हमारे पसीने की कमाई है. Who gave you your mind and intelligence? Who gave you your body? Who gave you the natural resources that you exploit for yourself? Everything comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's created this dunya for you. So while you are into that process, do not forget that He is the Raziq. And always be thankful to Him. And what is amazing that in Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you thank me more, I will increase. And when He increased, you had to do shukr again. And He will increase again. So this whole process has to go. Ni'mat of ghina goes with this element of shukr. Salawat pradhna ek baar. What else do we ask from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Imam says, وَعِزِّنِي. Oh Allah, give me izzat. Give me honor and dignity in society, that people would respect me. It's a good thing. It's a ni'mat. But immediately there is a problem which comes with it. وَعِزِّنِي وَلَا تَبْتَلِنِي بِالْكِبْرِ. Oh Allah, give me izzat, but do not test me with arrogance and takabbur. Because with that honor and dignity in society, that's what comes. There is the afat attached to it. And this is where we have to realize that, when Imam is talking, these are very, noble concepts that Imam is presenting. That these are good things, but even good things have this element of negativity. And you should not be, ignorant of that. Because kibr is a very serious issue. What happened to shaitan? He says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن طِينٍ. This is arrogance. Oh Allah, you created him from earth and you created me from fire. I am better than him. He forgot that Allah is the one who created both. Even the fire that he is talking about, and he himself is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes, and I'm not saying this is not a general statement, sometimes natural disasters happen to bring us down to the level that we should be, to shatter our arrogance. Just I think, was it about 3 years ago or so, when we had this volcanic eruption in Ireland, with black cloud covering almost, entire Europe. What happened? One of the northern European countries, there was a special ceremony of the king there, whether it was a funeral or something else, I don't remember, where all the heads of states were supposed to go there. But because of the volcanic eruption there, all airlines were stopped. They couldn't, fly. And those heads of state around that country, they traveled by car. But even your first, Air Force One could not go. And the passenger of that also couldn't go. It was a simple matter, but it reminds you can have the most advanced airlines, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do a very simple thing. And make you realize that yes, you have all this power, everything that is your disposal, but if Allah wants to shatter your arrogance, He can do it very easily. Once our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wa salam, he was invited by Mansur, the Abbasid Khalifa. And Imam refused. He asked, why? Why don't you come and visit me? Imam said, you don't have anything that I can benefit from. And what I have to give, you will not accept. So what is the point in meeting you? And he insisted, no, I would like you to come and visit me. So Imam went once. And while they were sitting there, once in a while, a fly, makhi. अमेरिका के बच्चे मक्खी भी नहीं जानते हैं खैर a small fly would come around, sit on the nose of Mansur, and he will use his hand to hit it, and it will fly away, and then it will go around and come back and sit on him. He became so irritated, he turned to the sixth Imam and he said, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create this makhi? And the answer Imam gave is very powerful. He said, Allah created it to humiliate tyrants like you. You have your army and money and everything at your disposal, but a small fly can irritate you, and you cannot do anything to it. And this is where we have to realize that Imam is saying, yes, Ask for izzat, honor in the society, but also ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep you away from kibr and arrogance. And that's where we see a following statement connected with it, where he says, pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا ترفعني في الناس إلا حتتني عند نفس مثلها. O Allah, do not elevate my status in the eyes of the people, but that you lower myself in my own eyes on the equal level. What we call, in Kesari, on a personal level. Humility on a personal level. So the more izzat you get, you should be inside, humble in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even when we talk about ibadat, ni'mat with its own problem. A person might, be blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where the dua is, وَعَبِّدْنِ لَكَ. Oh Allah, give me the tawfiq to do your ibadat. So He gives the tawfiq. I start praying on time, punctually, regularly, and then a problem starts. Shaitan doesn't go to the casinos, He doesn't have to worry about those people. He comes to those who are good. And so the dua is, وَعَبِّدْنِ لَكَ وَلَا تُفْسِدْ عِبَادَتِي بِالْعُجْبِ. O Allah, give me this tawfiq to become your true servant, to do your ibadat, but do not corrupt my ibadat by ujb. What is ujb? Ujb, this is the sense of self-glorification. MashaAllah, ab to hamari namaz bhi regular ho rahi hai. If somebody comes to me and says, Maulana, hum rozana pabandi se namaz shab padhte hain. कहते हैं बस खुदा खैर करे इसकी. Why you are telling me? What is the purpose of telling me? If you are doing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows. And this is where we have to realize ujub, basically the difference between kibr and ujub. The arrogance and self-glorification is that in kibr, you are being arrogant by putting someone else down. In ujub, means this is multilateral. It's me against, I'm better than him. Ujub is where there's nobody there, it's only me, feeling. We are not saying don't feel proud of yourself, but not to the extent where ujub comes in and it becomes like an acid on your ibadat and destroys it. And this is where we have to realize that Imam is basically talking about very noble, traits in human beings that we have to understand and identify and work on it to improve ourselves and keep ourselves from the negative aspects of it. Salawat from the Akbar. Very quick, I think I have gone over time, but one more statement. وَأَجْرِي لِلنَّاسِ عَلَيَّ يَدَيِّ الْخَيْرِ وَأَجْرِ لِلنَّاسِ عَلَى يَدَيِّ الْخَيْرِ وَلَا تَمْحَقُهُ بِالْمَنِّ. O Allah, let charity flow for people through my hands. Now that you have given me ghina, I'm asking you for the opportunity to be charitable towards the people. But even to be charitable has a problem. وَلَا تَمْحُقْهُ بِالْمَنِّ. But Allah, do not destroy its validity by man. What is man? Urdu mein कहते हैं मिन्नत रखना. Means to give charity to someone in such a way that the recipient feels humiliated. So although you are giving charity, but that charity has no value in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if it is attached with this element of humiliation for the person on the other side. And Quran actually talks about this quite a lot. If you look at Surah Baqarah, at the end, there are many ayat at the end of Surah Baqarah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't talk about giving charity. He is talking about the intention of giving, which is more important than the actual giving itself. And there are ayat after ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tubtilu sadaqatakum bil manni wal adha. O the people who believe, do not, make your charity invalid, batil, by doing a minnat on the person, or, hurting their feelings when you are giving it to them. And this is where, when you look at these are not only the words that Imam, uses in Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq. Imam had a tradition, ongoing, which was only known later on, that he actually, at the night time, he himself will carry a bag of bread and other items of food and go to the poor neighborhood in Medina with a mask on his face. He was known by the children and the women of that neighborhood as Sahibul Jirab, because they didn't know who is this person. They only know somebody who is coming with the covered face and who comes and gives bread and other items to us. It's only after the shahadat of the Imam they realize that, the Imam is no more there and that bread has stopped. And Imam used to say that when we give in charity, the best form of charity is when you give it in secrecy. Imam was so generous. Imam की जो खैरात की जो बात होती है, दुश्मन के साथ भी इमाम ने कभी खैरात से रोका नहीं है अपने। फरजदक जो मशहूर शायर है, जिसने इमाम के कसीदे को पढ़ा था फिलबदी, उसमें एक जुमला है, वाक़यान ये 100% फिट होता है इमाम की शख्सियत पर, जहाँ वो कहता है मा क़ाल ला क़त्तु इल्ला फ़ी तशहुदिही। यानी इमाम ज़ैनुल आबिदीन ने अपनी ज़िंदगी में कोई भी सामने आया है, कभी उसे ला नहीं कहा है, मदद करने से इनकार नहीं किया है। इमाम के ज़बान पर अगर ला आया है तो सिर्फ तशहुद में अशहदु अन ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह। और फिर फरजदक कहता है लौला तशहुद कानत लाउहु नअम, अगर नमाज में तशहुद वाजिब न होता तो इमाम की ज़बान पे कभी भी ला नहीं आता। मरवान बिन हकम की मिसाल अपने जहनों में आप रखें। ये खलीफे सालिस का दामाद है। जो भी बुराई हुई थी थर्ड एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में खिलाफत के, उसका जिम्मेदार वही था। इसका रवैया अमीरुल मोमिनीन के बारे में क्लियर है कि ये मुखालिफ था। इमाम हसन अलैहिस्सलाम के साथ भी जो उसने जुल्म किया है, जहाँ कोशिश हुई थी कि इमाम के जनाजे को रसूलुल्लाह के पहलू में दफन किया जाए, उनमें आगे आगे रोकने वालों में यही मरवान था। वलीद को जब यजीद का ख़त मिला है और इमाम हुसैन को उसने बुलाया था बैत तलब करने के लिए मदीना में, वहाँ थर्ड पर्सन जो बैठा था, जिसने वलीद से कहा था या बैत ले लो या इनका सर कलम करो, ये भी मरवान बिन हकम है। यानी हर जनरेशन में अमीरुल मोमिनीन के साथ, इमाम हसन के साथ, इमाम हुसैन के साथ इसने सिवाय बुराई के और कुछ नहीं चाहा। वाक़यात करबला में जो कुछ हुआ है ये शरीक था एक लिहाज से। अगर वहाँ फिजिकली मौजूद नहीं था तो तायीद उसकी मौजूद थी। करबला के तकरीबन 2 साल के बाद मदीना के हालात बदले हैं। मदीना के मुसलमानों ने जो है अपराइजिंग की है यजीद के ख़िलाफ़, और उस वक्त बनु उमैया के जो सरदार थे, जो यजीद के नुमाइंदे थे, इनकी जान जो है ख़तरे में पड़ गई। उन हालात में नाअमनी के माहौल में मरवान अपने लिए नहीं, अपने बीवी बच्चों के लिए पनाह की तलाश में निकला। अब्दुल्ला बिन उमर के घर जाता है दरवाजे पर। जब अब्दुल्ला बिन उमर दरवाजे पर आया, उसने दरख्वास्त की कि हम अपनी बात नहीं कर रहे हैं, हमारी बीवी बच्चों को अपने घर में पनाह दो। अब्दुल्ला बिन उमर ने दरवाज़ा बंद कर दिया। آخر میں مروان بن حکم کہاں جاتا ہے؟ اس دروازے پہ جاتا ہے جس میں کہا جاتا ہے کہ لا کبھی نہیں کہیں گے. وہ امام زین العابدین کے دروازے پہ جاتا ہے، درخواست کی کہ ہم چاہتے ہیں کہ اپنی بیوی بچوں کے لیے آپ پناہ دیں اپنے گھر میں. امام نے کوئی ہیزیٹیشن اور تعمل نہیں دکھایا، فوراً اس کی بیوی بچوں کو اپنے گھر میں پناہ دیتے ہیں. سوال یہ ہے، کیا امام زین العابدین بھول گئے تھے اس نے کیا کیا ہے؟ خصوصاً جب وہ اپنی بیوی بچوں کو پناہ کے لیے لے کے آیا ہے. کیا امام زین العابدین کو یاد نہیں تھا اس نے کیا کیا ہے؟ یقیناً یاد تھا، لیکن یہ جہاد بالاخلاق ہے. امام بتانا چاہ رہے تھے کہ دیکھو، ہم میں اور تم میں آسمان اور زمین کا فرق ہے، اور ہم اپنے کو تیرے لیول پر گرانے والے نہیں ہیں. امام بھولے نہیں تھے. روایات مختلف ہے، لیکن کم سے کم کی تعبیر ملتی ہے 20 سال تک مسلسل امام روئے. اپنے بابا کو بھولے نہیں تھے، کربلا کو بھولے نہیں تھے. جب کھانا پیش کیا جاتا تھا تو کربلا کے بچوں کی بھوک یاد آتی تھی. جب وضو کے لیے پانی لایا جاتا تھا، کبھی سکینہ کی پیاس یاد آتی تھی، کبھی اصغر کا چہرہ سامنے آ جاتا تھا. کبھی کبھی اتنا روتے تھے کہ آنسو سے پانی مضاف ہو جاتا تھا. اور یہی بات ہے کہ ایک قریبی صحابی یا غلام تھے، جرأت کر کے کہتے ہیں، اور وہ امام کا وہی جملہ جو ابن زیاد کے دربار میں امام نے کہا تھا، جو کل ہم نے آپ کے سامنے پیش کیا، اسے بنیاد بنا کے کہا کہ کیا امام وہ وقت نہیں آ گیا ہے کہ آپ ان مصائب کا بھول جائیں اور صبر کریں؟ اس وقت امام نے کہا، اے شخص، تو نے ہمارے ساتھ انصاف نہیں کیا ہے. یعقوب کے 12 بیٹے تھے، ایک صرف غائب ہو گیا تھا، معلوم تھا کہ قتل نہیں ہوا ہے، لیکن اتنا روئے ہیں، قرآن میں ہے کہ ان کے رونے کی وجہ سے بینائی ختم ہو جاتی ہے، آنکھ کی روشنی ختم ہو جاتی ہے. تو نے انصاف نہیں کیا ہے. میرے سامنے ایک دن میں میرے گھر کے 18 افراد قتل کر دیے گئے. وہ شخص جرأت کرتا ہے، کہتا ہے، مولا، لیکن خدا کی راہ میں قتل ہونا آپ کے خاندان کی عادت سی بن گئی ہے. اس وقت امام نے کہا کہ تو نے انصاف نہیں کیا ہے. ہم بابا کے قتل کو ہم برداشت کر لے، ہم اکبر کے سینے پر برچی لگنے کو برداشت کر لے، قاسم کے جسم کے پامیلی کو برداشت کر دے، اصغر کی شہادت کو بھی صبر کر لیں اس پر ہم، لیکن یہ بتاؤ کہ کیا ہمارے خاندان کی یہ عادت بن گئی ہے کہ ہمارے گھر کی عورتیں، ہماری ماں، بہن اور پھوپھی اور ان کے مقنع اور چادر کو لوٹا جائے، اور کربلا سے کوفہ اور کوفہ سے شام اس طرح سے پیش کیا جائے جس طرح سے ترک اور دیلم کے کفار اسیروں کو پیش کیا جاتا ہے. اے شخص، تو نے میرے ساتھ انصاف نہیں کیا ہے. اور یہی مصیبت تھی جس کو امام ہمیشہ یاد کرتے رہے. اور جب بھی پوچھا گیا ہے مولا سب سے زیادہ اذیت کہاں ہوئی، عاشور کا ذکر نہیں کیا ہے، بابا کے لاش کے پاس حرمتی ہوئی ہے، اسے کبھی ہم بھول نہیں سکتے. الا لعنت اللہ علی القوم الظالمین سیعلم الذین ایما منقلب